Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, Brutal Legend on Xbox 360. The concept of the genre mashup has always been one of my favorite things to explore in fiction, and especially in games. There is simply so much to discover and devise when one is not sticking rigidly to genre conventions. But unfortunately, today's genre mashup may have been too many steps too far for the average gamer during the years of the Xbox 360's dominance. Today, we discuss 2009's Brutal Legend. Heavy metal, as a music genre, has always been an integral part of my life. It has always been, to quote another aficionado out on the internet, my music. I have never liked country, or pop, or jazz, or, and God's forbid, adult contemporary. And while punk, rap, and classical have had some bangers, if it weren't for metal, I very likely would not listen to music at all. So, when I found out there would be a game where metal music was the central focus of the game, with a cartoon art style, and voiced by Jack Black of, at least what I knew him from, Tenacious D fame, as well as several famous metal performers, I knew it would be the game for me. And then I played it. Oh, Brutal Legend. We need to talk. The history of heavy metal, and this figures deeply into the aesthetic of the game, can be almost directly and singularly traced back to one band, Black Sabbath. Formed in 1968, Black Sabbath was initially intended, in the words of its lead guitarist Tony Iommi, to be a blues band. And when the members got together and adopted vocalist Ozzy Osbourne, their melodies and songwriting changed to a more dark and fantastical tone, inadvertently starting a whole new subgenre within rock and roll. Yes, you may get people pointing to other influences like Deep Purple, Cream, and Led Zeppelin adding to the genre, but Black Sabbath is the sole starting place, as pointed out by many metal historians. Quickly, other bands, active at the time, or soon starting, adopted the quote-unquote Sabbath sound, adding in strains of blues, classical, and hardcore punk rock to bring about a musical revolution, and one that would always be disliked by the mainstream, and would court controversy, whether it wanted to or not. In time, many new brands of heavy metal would break free from this core sound and would get new subgenre labels such as thrash, speed, doom, goth, stoner, sludge, progressive, death, and black, among many more. Horror iconography of the 1970s, as well as anti-establishment political and anti-religious or atheistic iconography, was very much part of the early years of metal, along with the disquieting tone in music and lyrics, which could easily range from shock for the sake of shock to deeply philosophical. And this was just sort of a non-issue until the early 1980s, especially in the United States, in the wake of the election of conservative evangelical icon Ronald Reagan to the office of president, and the cultural backlash against the free love, anti-establishment 1960s, and the cocaine-fueled 1970s that labeled metal music as a public moral danger, along with most movies, comic books, Dungeons & Dragons, and other subcultures that were not considered typically all-American, in quotes, as part of the Satanic Panic, a cultural movement based on lies, paranoia, fear of the other, fear of communist ideology, misunderstandings about mental illness, homophobia, and far more complex topics that led the average American to believe the mythological devil was directly influencing their children through television, print media, movies, and for our discussion, music. Print journalism and the evening news, hungry for views and ratings on the Nielsen rating charts, didn't do a fucking thing, as usual, to tell the honest facts or dissuade such falsehoods. Instead, they fueled public fears. Actually doing the right thing would have been anti-American, much like how they acted during the McCarthy hearings decades earlier. But in the eyes of most Americans, metal was never taken seriously again, outside of the perception as music for angry teenagers that they'll soon outgrow, or something for the mentally disturbed. I guess I'm something of a stereotype, then, myself, as I'm a long-haired, anti-establishment, comic book-loving, video game-playing, D&D playing, geeky atheist metalhead over 30 myself who wears a lot of black. I'm the perfect guy to be talking about this game, which we'll be getting back to shortly, I promise. Brutal Legend began its existence as the brainchild of longtime former LucasArts developer, the guys who did a lot of the Star Wars, as well as many other famous computer games, as it was owned by, George Lucas, for the younger listeners out there, and Double Fine Productions founder Tim Schafer. based on his own musical experiences. He wanted to do a game about heavy metal, and the idea quickly morphed into a game where we play as rock and roll roadie named Eddie Riggs, voiced by and his in-game likeness modeled on actor/musician Jack Black, a man who had to take his jobs where he could, but is stuck doing a concert venue setup for a shitty pop-punk band of the type popular during the mid-2000s. And he's just sick of his life. Eddie wants real metal back, like, the early 70s, man. If you get that joke, I'm proud of you. But during an onstage accident between the band's monstrous animatronic demon and some shoddy electrical work, Eddie is transported to another world entirely, one where the whole landscape looks like it came off of an early Judas Priest or Motorhead album cover. Fitting, as both Lemmy Kilminster and Rob Halford voice major characters in this game. He steals a hot rod car made of steel and monster bone, the kind of cartoonishly huge pipes extending like bat wings from the sides that would have made cartoonist Ed Roth of Rat Fink fame proud, and almost instantly, after fleeing demons trying to devour him, he finds himself amid a world of warrior women and beer-chugging metalheads trying to fight against an evil empire trying to dominate their world through the trappings of 1980s Los Angeles-style hair metal, the kind made famous by bands like Motley Crue, Poison, Warrant, or Cinderella. Man, I'm dropping a lot of names this episode. Even more, Eddie is gifted with his own quote-unquote axe by the metal gods, a flying V-style electric guitar capable of not only decapitating both man and monster alike, but sending out earth-shattering, thunderous power chords and lightning. Very metal indeed. Eddie is not the smartest cookie in the box, but he is the chosen one, a warrior from another world destined to fight the forces of General Lionwhite. And if you get that one, I'm doubly proud of you. Also, congratulations, you're old. Eddie quickly gathers a small army of helpers and followers, and a special lady that he will fight for even though he has trouble admitting that he likes her, and will meet Metal's various famous mothers and fathers throughout the game, voiced by some of the names you know, but may not want to admit to. Eddie's a great guy, the kind of guy who would give you the shirt off his back, and he is a genuine hero, even if his world is wild and crazy. To add to the world theme, Tim Schafer went out and found a genuine metal music expert in LA at a record store who helped advise him on what bands and what songs he should include. The final total of licensed tracks in the game being 107 songs that can be unlocked in the game and found on the radio stations for the car Eddie drives. Bands like Accept, Anthrax, Candlemass, Def Leppard, Dimmu Borgir, Mastodon, Megadeth, Slayer, and Testament, among many others. You don't get soundtracks like this that are so genre-specific, unless you are a Rockstar game and have their kind of money for licensing. But here's where I think the game begins to fall apart for me, and for perhaps many other gamers at the time. First off, the initial hour of the game presents itself as a go-anywhere, do-anything action sort of game like a Grand Theft Auto, running down demonic monsters and rescuing your fledgling army from the enemy. The dialogue is snappy and well-written and performed. The landscape is colorful, and the plot hooks are cool. However, the game soon begins to bring out its other action genre that it's blended with: real-time strategy. That's right, Brutal Legend is, at its core, an RTS game, like Total War or Age of Empires or Command & Conquer. You know, a computer RTS game that needs a full computer keyboard. On a console. RTS gamers and games are another genre that I am terrible at, and which I do not enjoy simply because it takes too much of my already taxed mental bandwidth to worry about troop positions, enemy movement, and all other things that would disqualify me from being a military specialist. And the action portion of this action hybrid game stops dead the second you, as the player, are required to do one of the many necessary and plot-relevant RTS missions, which, on an action-focused console like the Xbox 360, with its plethora of brown corridor and cover twitch reflex shooters, was already a bad sign. Double Fine Productions, coming from a PC background to a console, may have made an oopsie there. Secondly, heavy metal as a genre is a very niche audience, especially in the States. Maybe it did better in Europe, where there's a wider audience for metal, but not so here. If it had been a game about famous R&B and second or third generation rappers, with famous rap icons like, say, a Def Jam Fight for New York, although I must admit I personally don't know who most of the celebrity performers in that game were, the setting and soundtrack may have helped get it over the hump and into more success. Sadly, that was not the choice the developers went with, and while I loved the concept, the generation playing on the Xbox 360 were not predominantly metalheads at that time. I hope by now, listeners, by the information I gave and the names I rattled off to you, you can tell how excited I was for this title, and maybe how disappointed I was in what it turned out to be. I wanted so much to love Brutal Legend, I really did. It was both loving homage as well as gentle send-up of the metal genre, and brought much-needed attention to a music that had been my life and helped define in part who I am, and had been my own personal soundtrack for when I'm happy, for when I'm depressed, for when I need a pick-me-up or I need to express. But attaching it to a type of game I'm literally functionally bad at and do not enjoy was a bad call. It would be like, say, attaching a rhythm gameplay or heavy metal to something like an FPS. Oh, wait. Brutal Legend should have been genre-defining and genre-breaking. And while initial reviews by critics were good, talking about the art direction and the voice acting being the highlights, they could not get past the gameplay mix either. And 360 players across the land looked up briefly from their Call of Duty clones when Brutal Legend debuted, collectively grunted in disinterest at it, and went back to their shooty bang-bangs. What had we learned? Don't release RTS games on console. It went so poorly, then, that when asked about a sequel, Schafer and his crew bluntly stated that their sequel plans, which were already in the works, had been completely scrapped, and they would not be moving forward with any more games from this setting. So the Brutal Legend we have is all that we are getting. Brutal Legend is an unfortunate example of something new, attempted, that wasn't amazing, but also wasn't so bad everyone had to try it out, and be fun despite the problem. It wasn't poorly made or acted. It just wasn't the kind of genre mashup the gaming public would accept, it would seem. It was a cool idea that simply ended up being not very noteworthy at all for all the time, expertise, and licensing money that went into creating the world and its characters. And then trying to market it on top of that, which also sold the game like dog shit ice cream cones, with Jack Black portraying the character of Eddie Riggs on late-night television audiences who couldn't have given a shit less and were confused, and at events where he stood out among non-metal musicians like a sore thumb, and among actual metal musicians who didn't take the Tenacious D guy seriously. I guess in that way everyone acted like a stereotype towards Brutal Legend. Stereotypical assholes, that is. Thank you for listening.